The shadowy figure promised me fame, fortune, and love in exchange for the souls of 10 people whom I would never meet. As my wife sobbed over our second stillborn child, I realized how it was making me pay my debt. Everyone on Earth was born with a dormant superpower that would activate after the worst trauma of your life. Imagine my terror when my wife and son were murdered in front of me, and I still had no power at all. 9/11, what is your emergency? I asked, just like many times today. I almost fainted when on the other side I recognized my daughter whispering, "Daddy's home." I was embarrassed when everyone started staring at me, so I left the restaurant. On the drive home, all the passerby turned and stared, and when I got home and turned on the game, the entire stadium went dead silent and stared into the camera. We stayed in the bunker with our parents for 10 years after the world was destroyed. Our dad went out to scavenge one day when we heard someone shout, "Freeze!" and uniformed men with FBI insignias came down and said, "They're alive!" Back before my husband was deployed, he made it very clear that he did not want to be kept alive if he was ever to return in a vegetative or quadriplegic state. And I promised to honor his wishes. It hurts to see that desperate, burning resentment in his eyes every time I look at him, but I'm definitely not about to give up the financial aid package I received for providing in-home care to a disabled veteran. I shook my son roughly as I said, "I've explained this to you a million times. Why don't we talk to strangers?" "Because my real mom and dad might find me," the boy replied sullenly. Honestly, it's a little disgusting to watch you eat. I knew it didn't take much to send my bulimic daughter off crying. I wasn't about to let her waste all the garlic bread. "Now you must choose one of your children to die." I'd have forgiven her choosing me if she'd hesitated. The bully mocked her in front of the entire class, pointing to the red stain on her jeans while shouting, "What's the matter? Couldn't hold it in?" Years later, as he lay sobbing on the floor, desperately clutching at multiple stab wounds on his stomach, she leaned down and whispered, "What's the matter? Can't hold it in." After our last miscarriage, my wife was inconsolable, and I vowed to do what I could so we could have a baby. After prepping our basement all day, I found the perfect surrogate walking back to her dorm later that night. Researchers were over the moon that they finally found a cure for the virus that had turned thousands of people into zombies. Their joy only lasted a few days, as it became obvious that while cognitive function and consciousness could be fully restored, the treatment was useless when it comes to stopping decomposition. "I'm flattered, but I've a boyfriend," I told the young guy who was trying to hand me a note with his number. With a polite smile, the guy on the other side of the counter unfolded the note that read, "Do as I say, I'm wearing a bomb." When the enemy snuck up on me, I quickly disarmed him and broke his neck. I regretted not dealing with my PTSD sooner as my wife lay lifeless on the kitchen floor. Owning a pet chimpanzee is a lot more expensive than I thought it would be. I spent $200 a month on food, $500 on toys, and $450,000 on facial reconstruction surgery. My boyfriend has delicately touched my left arm and tapped it twice. This has been our goodbye sign since my head injury and deaf blindness associated with it, but I wasn't familiar with the sign in the particular context of having a lovely walk in the forest. Am I the asshole for giving my daughter's allegedly abusive ex-husband her new address after he asked to work things out with her? I think she's overreacting. It's been 3 weeks and she still won't answer her phone. I asked if the cookies had any nuts, and my cousin said not to worry. I happily took a bite before I heard them say, "You've probably grown out of your allergies by now." Ever since my husband's suicide, my daughter has asked me to check for the monster under her bed. Last night, as I knelt down to look, she whispered with a shaking voice, "Don't look into his eyes. That's how he got Daddy." As a male nurse, I have to work really hard not be accused of sexual misconduct. Thankfully, now that I work with Alzheimer's patients, they can't remember anything I do to them. Even after all this time, my boyfriend still scratches my back until I fall asleep, because he knows how bad my anxiety gets at night. I sit by his grave every morning and assure him that it's okay to move on, and that I'll learn to be fine without him here. I checked my nails after dipping them in my drink, and was relieved when they didn't change color. The charming guy next to me is going to have a shock when he wakes, realizing I switched drinks on him. I responded to the 911 call quickly, sprinting towards the sound of a woman wailing. I could have sworn I was going in the right direction, but the deeper I get into the woods, the further away she seems to be. She left me a note that said, "I'm sorry, but you're too overweight." She was gone, and so was the thin rope and supplies we scraped together over weeks stuck in this horrid cave system. I tried to forgive the drunk driver that killed my wife. One day, however, I saw his son playing in the street and the rage took over. Before he left, I asked the time traveler why he never sought fame or fortune. With a mournful look, he replied, "I just wanted air I didn't have to pay for." My husband's symptoms were immediately recognizable as classic signs of possession. Unfortunately for him, the demon was a much better spouse, so I went ahead and canceled his appointment with the bishop. I got out the car after my drunken friend had called me a backseat driver because I had told him not to drive 200 in a 100 zone. As I called my mum for a pickup, I watched in horror as the car swerved and my 3 friends tumbled to their deaths. My friend, a fellow Instagram model, invited me to join her in Dubai, making lots of money as a high-end companion to very wealthy men. Now, isolated on a yacht with 6 men and a dog, I'm really wishing I had asked more questions before agreeing to this gig. My sweet grandson says my name once before bed each night, having read that you only really die when someone mentions you for the last time. It's been 50 years now, and each night I pray he forgets as I stare up at that horrifying infinite blackness. The hardest part to stomach wasn't the lies they told us. It was the slow, painful, eventually fatal calcification of the intestines, after they had said the water was safe to drink. Wow, and I thought my cold medicine made me loopy. My daughter's daycare just called me at work to ask me where she was, as if I'd know what happens after I drop her off. When my dad, suffering from Alzheimer's, started repeating women's names, even calling me by them, I wondered if he had had affairs in the past. But I learned the truth when his garden was being excavated and a collection of driver's licenses were found in his bedside drawer. Seeing my ex-girlfriend's face on the news was a real blast from the past. Can't believe it's taken 7 years for someone to finally stumble across her body. "Send help! There's so many of us locked down here," the caller cried, as I assured her I was coming. As I hung up, I heard her say, "But I never told you where we were." My boyfriend always leaves a meal in the fridge for me, keeps the house snug and warm, and he has the best body I've ever seen on a man. I was planning to introduce myself to him today, but decided to wait a little longer. One of my friends always brags that he'd do anything for money, and so far he's held true to that statement. But even after everything he's done, we still didn't expect him to stick that toothpick under his toenail and kick the wall for $20. The devil gave me 2 choices: either have my family killed for $50K, or my friends dead for $50K. When I decided I didn't want either, he gave me $100K. The most recent time he punched me, my boyfriend wept as he promised that he loved me and that he would never, ever do it again. As I added the rat poison to his dinner, I knew that for once, he would keep this promise. I thought it was a good idea to insist on a paternity test when the baby was born. But when the police joined the doctor to deliver the results, I found out they linked the DNA database to unsolved crimes. I kissed my wife one last time before I said goodbye. As I rounded the corner and saw them pulling up, I hoped the cartel I owed money to would accept her and my children as payment enough to finally leave me alone. He ran the calculations again on the enormous asteroid hurtling toward Earth before sitting back in his chair, stunned. The conclusion was inescapable. It was slowing down.